The first thing Harold Jenkins noticed that Sunday morning was the silence. Not the normal quiet of Maple Ridge Estates, where the loudest sound was usually Mrs. Ramirez's chihuahua yapping at squirrels, but a heavier, watchful silence, the kind that falls over a firebase right before contact. He was 79 years old, half blind in his left eye from shrapnel outside Key, San in 68, and he still knew that silence the way other men know their wife's breathing in the dark. He set his coffee on the porch rail and walked to the front door. 3 hard knocks. Official knocks. The kind that don't ask permission. 2 men stood there in black polo shirts, so knew the creases still showed. Gold badges caught the sun. The taller one carried a clipboard like it was a loaded M16. The shorter one had a body camera blinking red on his chest, the kind real cops wear. Only this one looked too clean, like it had never seen rain or blood. Harold T. Jenkins, the tall one asked. His voice had that practiced flatness that comes from reading too many scripts. That's me. Maple Ridge Homeowners Restoration Authority. You're in serious violation of compliance codes dating back to 2018. We're here to help you avoid federal forfeiture. Harold almost smiled. The HOA had voted itself out of existence in 2014. He had chaired the meeting himself, signed the dissolution papers in his own kitchen, while neighbors drank bad grocery store wine and cheered. He still had the minutes in a folder marked victory. He said none of that. Instead, he stepped aside and let them in. They moved like men who had done this before. Eyes sweeping corners, cataloging exits, lingering on the folded flag in its walnut case, the shadow box of medals on the wall, the recent photo of his grandson Daniel in dress blues taken at the ball last year. Daniel's eyes in that picture were the same eyes Harold saw in the mirror every morning, calm, watchful, already counting threats. They asked for the deed, the property survey, the tax records. Harold handed them over without protest. 45 years in uniform had taught him when to fight and when to gather intelligence. While the tall one photographed every page with a phone that never left airplane mode, the shorter one asked casual questions about family, about whether Harold lived alone, about whether anyone else had keys to the house. 12 minutes later they left with polite smiles and a promise to return Monday with resolution paperwork. Their white van had Maple Ridge Restoration Authority lettered on the side in perfect government font, complete with a phone number that rang to a voicemail saying all representatives were busy serving other patriots. Harold watched them drive away, then poured the rest of his coffee into the azaleas and started making phone calls. The second visit came exactly 7 days later. This time there were 4 men. Same uniforms, same van, but now they had backup. A thick-necked bruiser who looked like he'd played linebacker until the steroids ran out. He carried himself the way men do when they're used to people stepping aside on sidewalks. They didn't knock. They simply walked up the driveway like they already owned it. Harold met them on the porch in his old army sweatshirt, the one with the faded 1st Cavalry patch. He had spent the week doing his own reconnaissance, searching county records, calling friends still in uniform, running the van's plates through a buddy at the DMV. Everything came back registered to a Nevada shell company that had been formed 6 weeks ago and had no physical address. The tall one, the leader, held a thick folder sealed with red tape that looked exactly like the kind used on classified documents. Mr. Jenkins, our legal review is complete. Your property is now subject to immediate administrative transfer under Federal Emergency Housing Restoration Act, Section 404. You have 2 options: sign the temporary stewardship agreement or vacate the premises within the hour. Harold flipped through the pages. The language was beautiful gibberish, paragraph after paragraph of citations to statutes that didn't exist. He recognized the technique. Overwhelm the target with official-looking nonsense until they sign anything to make it stop. I'll need to speak to my attorney, Harold said. The linebacker stepped forward. That's not one of the options, Pops. He rested a meaty hand on the baton, riding his hip. Real baton. Fake authority. Dangerous combination. The leader produced a phone and held it to his ear with theatrical menace. Control, this is Team 4. We have a non-compliant resident. Request immediate backup for forced relocation. There was no dial tone. Harold caught the black screen. The man was talking to a dead phone. Across the street, Mrs. Ramirez was already dialing the only number she trusted in situations like this. Daniel picked up on the second ring. Grandpa's in trouble, she whispered. 4 men in uniforms. They're threatening to take him away. Daniel was elbow deep in a Humvee transmission at Camp Pendleton. He dropped the torque wrench, told his gunny he had a family emergency, and was rolling south on I-5 doing 90 before most people finished their first cup of coffee. He made the 43-mile drive in 31 minutes. He found Harold sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around his stone-cold mug, staring out the window like he was waiting for an artillery barrage that was late. They'll be back tomorrow with more muscle, Harold said without looking up. They think I'm alone. Daniel spent the rest of the day turning a quiet suburban house into a defensive position. Motion lights, reinforced door jams, a GoPro on the porch disguised as a birdhouse. He slept in his truck 2 blocks over, seat reclined, rifle case in the back, eyes on the street through night vision binoculars borrowed from the armory. At 0703 the next morning the white van returned, followed by a black Suburban with tinted windows. 4 men again. Same crew plus 1 new face built like a refrigerator with legs. They moved in a diamond formation Harold recognized from too many decades ago. Leader up front with the fake warrant, muscle left and right, refrigerator bringing rear security. Amateur hour dressed up as professionalism. Harold stepped onto the porch in his dress blues. He hadn't worn them since his retirement parade in '89, but the jacket still fit, and the medals still caught the light. He wanted them to see exactly who they had chosen to target. The leader began reading from his script about federal emergency codes. When Harold asked to see a judicial warrant signed by a real judge, the refrigerator lost patience. He and the linebacker grabbed Harold's arms and started dragging him down the steps. 79 years old, bad hip, 2 replaced knees, and still Harold managed to plant his feet long enough to shout, "Help! These men are kidnapping me." Mrs. Ramirez was filming from her upstairs window. Half the neighborhood was on their phones. The refrigerator yanked open the van's sliding door. That was when they forgot to watch their 6. Daniel came through the side gate moving low and fast, the way he'd learned in room-clearing drills. He crossed the lawn in 4 silent strides and stepped onto the porch directly behind the refrigerator. "Release him." For heads turned. The linebacker actually laughed. "Kid, walk away. This is federal business." Daniel reached slow into his back pocket and held up his military ID. The eagle glinted like a bayonet in the sun. "Staff Sergeant Daniel Jenkins, United States Marine Corps. You just committed felony assault on a decorated combat veteran. You have 3 seconds to let him go." The laughter died. 1. The leader's grip loosened. 2. The linebacker reached for his baton. 3. It lasted exactly 3 seconds. Daniel stepped inside the leader's reach and drove an elbow into his solar plexus that folded the man like a cheap lawn chair. Before he hit the ground, Daniel already had the second man's wrist twisted until the elbow hyperextended with a wet pop, then kneed him in the liver hard enough to shut down his nervous system for 20 minutes. The refrigerator spun, swinging a wild right that would have taken a normal man's head off. Daniel slipped inside it, hooked the ankle, and used the man's own momentum to slam 300 pounds of angry meat into the driveway. The crack of skull on concrete echoed up and down the block. The driver saw what happened to his team, slammed the Suburban into reverse, and disappeared in a cloud of burned rubber. Daniel zip-tied the 3 conscious criminals with the same plastic restraints he carried in his cargo pocket for exactly this kind of day. He activated the body camera clipped to his plate carrier and began reciting rights like he was reading from a script he'd memorized in boot camp. Real police arrived 8 minutes later to find the suspects trussed and groaning, a Marine standing calm guard, and an old soldier straightening his medals with steady hands. Officer Nguyen watched the body cam footage on the hood of his cruiser and just shook his head. "I've seen bar fights that lasted longer than that takedown," he said. "You do this for a living, son?" "Only when family's involved, sir." The search of the van turned up 15 folders, each one a veteran living alone. Medical records that should have required security clearances. Bank statements. Photos of houses taken from public sidewalks. And on the leader's phone, a text thread that ended every message with the same instruction. "Send all video to Senator's office." Priority read. The senator's name was Margaret Whitlock. 43 years earlier, in a humid supply tent outside Da Nang, Captain Harold Jenkins had presided over the court-martial of a young lieutenant caught selling Red Cross blankets on the black market. She had cried, begged, threatened. Harold had signed the papers anyway. She was reduced to second lieutenant, discharged without honors, and escorted to the tarmac with nothing but her duffel and her rage. She spent the next 4 decades turning that rage into a political career built on veteran issues, smiling for cameras while quietly settling a very old score. The body cam footage hit veteran Facebook groups before noon. By evening, it was on every major network with the cheering "Marine grandson stops fake cops in 3 seconds flat." By the end of the week, it had 40 million views and its own hashtag. 2 weeks later, Harold walked into the Senate hearing room wearing the same dress blues he'd worn on the porch. The medals clinked softly when he sat. Margaret Whitlock was already at the witness table, makeup perfect, hands folded like she was attending a fundraiser. Harold looked straight at her and spoke the rank she had lost in 1972. "Lieutenant Whitlock, I taught you that an officer's first duty is to the soldiers under her command. You spent 40 years proving you never learned that lesson." He laid the old court-martial packet on the table. Yellowed carbon copies, still crisp. Dates, signatures, the exact dollar amount of missing aid. The room was silent enough to hear the cameras clicking. Whitlock tried to interrupt. Her voice cracked on the first word. Harold kept talking, calm, relentless, the way officers speak when they know history is listening. "You targeted men who served when you were still learning how to salute. You used their service against them. You forgot that some of us raised grandsons who never forget either." When he finished, the chairman asked Margaret Whitlock if she had anything to say. For the first time in 43 years, she had no speech prepared. She looked at the man who had ended her military career and whispered the only truth she had left. "I never thought anyone would fight back." Federal marshals were waiting in the hallway. 6 months later, 47 families had their homes returned with interest. 12 shell companies were dissolved. Congress passed the Veterans Home Protection Act with penalties so stiff that even the sleaziest lawyers read the fine print twice. Harold received the Civilian Valor Medal in a ceremony at the San Diego Veterans Memorial. The commandant of the Marine Corps pinned it himself and told the crowd, "This is what right looks like when it finally catches up to wrong." Daniel made gunnery sergeant and took a new billet training military police on elder abuse recognition. On weekends, he still drives the old route to Maple Ridge Estates. The porch light is always on. The coffee is always fresh. And the flag still flies straight and true, same as it did the morning everything changed. Some debts take 50 years to settle. Some lessons only take 3 seconds to teach. That's the whole story, folks. No loose ends, no sequels waiting in the wings. Justice got served the old-fashioned way. One Marine, one grandfather, and one senator who finally ran out of time. Now I want to hear from you. Was Daniel right to use that much force, even against men who were technically unarmed? When someone puts hands on your family, where do you draw the line? And how long is too long to carry a grudge before it becomes pure evil? Drop your thoughts below. No filter, no judgment. Some topics hit harder when we say them out loud. This is one of them.